The Phrygian mode has a distinctive, intense and dark minor sound. Because of this, Phrygian is often used in metal music to provide an evil or exotic edge. Listen to how it sounds here with the E Phrygian scale, which has the notes E, F, G, A, B, C and D. Compare this to the E natural minor / Aeolian mode. You can see that there's one note of difference, F sharp. This is the second scale degree of the natural minor scale. In the Phrygian mode, this is a flat or minor second scale degree. This note will be vital in defining the Phrygian sound in the riff examples. Phrygian is a minor sounding scale. This is because it has a flat third note in it. So two notes you really want to focus on in Phrygian riffs are the flat 2 and the flat 3. In the key of E Phrygian, these are the notes F and G. A riff is a short, repeated, memorable musical phrase. Although strongly associated with rock music and the electric guitar, a riff can feature in any genre and be played on any instrument. The majority of riffs are between 1 and 4 bars in length. Any longer can sound like a melody or solo. All riffs are repeated. This is an essential part of the riff and how they hook themselves into the listener's mind. You could also call them a motif. That is, a musical idea that repeats. A riff can define a song. The first thing you hear in many songs is a riff, and they are a core part of many massive hits. Riffs are like a whole song, bundled up into a short, repeatable package. As such, they are comprised of 3 main parts: rhythm, harmony, and melody. I'll use the E Phrygian scale now to demonstrate some different riff ideas. I'll present guitar tabs for the riffs, but remember that these ideas can apply to any instrument or MIDI. Tabs were created in Guitar Pro. There's a link in the description if you'd like to try out Guitar Pro for yourself. E Phrygian is a guitar-friendly key. In standard tuning, you can play any of the open strings without being out of key. As such, it can open up all sorts of easy-to-play riff ideas. Almost anything can be a riff, but for ease, I'm going to break them into a few categories here to help you think about the different riff approaches. The sound or genre that you are aiming for may dictate the riff styles that you prefer. As always, trust your ear and go with it. Let's start with some interval-based riffs. An interval is simply the distance between 2 notes. Intervals are the building blocks of chords and scales. As such, they are a great point to construct a riff from. The bulk of guitar riffs are played on the lower 3 strings. The E, A and D strings have power and authority associated with bass notes, as the bass generally defines the harmony above it. Denser strings also produce more volume. Because of this, I'll focus on these lower registers in the examples. If you're working with a scale, such as E Phrygian here, you can experiment by playing 2 notes in the scale that create an interval you like the sound of. Once you find the interval you like, then you can work on the rhythmic idea for your riff. For example, here's a simple riff using 2 notes in the E Phrygian scale, E and F. This interval is a distance of 1 semitone or half step. This is known as a minor second. It has a classic dissonant sound that you will recognise. A certain film about a shark might come to mind. I'll play the interval and then develop the rhythm of the riff. So much of the riff writing process is experimentation. Intervals can be played horizontally like you just saw. This is what you would find in a melody, or you can stack them vertically. This is when both notes are played at the same time. This is how chords are created. In the next example, I'll play notes from the E Phrygian scale at the same time. Listen to how this changes the sound. Each interval will have an open E note in it. Repeating a note like this in a riff is known as a pedal note. I'll discuss this in more detail later. Look out again for the development of the rhythm in this example. I've shown you some of the notes in E Phrygian, but what creates the Phrygian sound? At the beginning of the video I explained how the only point of difference between the Phrygian scale and the natural minor scale / Aeolian mode is the flat second note. So this note is critical to the Phrygian sound. You also want to highlight that Phrygian has a minor sound or quality. This is heard through the use of the flat third note, and also the root note of the scale so you know where the tonic or home is. Here's an example that highlights these notes in the E Phrygian scale, E, F and G. It starts with these 3 key notes, with particular emphasis on the E and F to highlight the flat second. It then introduces some more notes, repeating the rhythmic end of the first bar to provide some cohesion across the riff. The root note E is the lowest in the riff to highlight its role as the tonic. Let's talk now about pedal note riffs. A pedal note is one that remains the same, usually low down in the arrangement, whilst other notes or chords change above it. This will usually use open E, A and D strings on the guitar. If the note doesn't sustain throughout the riff, it may also be referred to as a pedal point. It will often be the root note of the relevant scale that is repeated to really anchor the listener in the key of the song, but it doesn't have to be, so feel free to experiment. If you've heard metal riffs with palm muted E strings throughout, they are an example of this. This might be one reason to try a drop tuning, like drop D, to get a suitable open note to pedal throughout your riff. You saw an example earlier that had a pedal note. Here's one in E Phrygian that again uses the E open string, but also the F and G notes I want to target. Now it's time for a classic riff component, the power chord. A favourite of rock and metal, the power chord is a simple, powerful element in many iconic riffs. A power chord is actually just the perfect fifth interval, so it relates back to the first two examples in this video. Power chords are often used with pedal notes that I discussed previously. This is particularly prevalent in metal riffs. On guitar they are usually played as two-note chords, with the first and fifth, or as a three-note chord with the octave added above the fifth. If using a distorted guitar sound, you might also find other techniques used with power chords, such as palm muting and slides. A simple starting point for generating power chord riffs is to use the notes in the relevant scale for your song, and then using each note as a root note for a power chord. As with other riffs, the rhythmic element is almost more important than the actual chords being played. Here's an example in E Phrygian using power chords and other single note lines. The power chord riff leads us nicely into the full-blown chord riff. As the name suggests, this is simply combining full chords into a riff. This is where the lines between chord progression and riff can become blurred. But as discussed earlier, the riff will be shorter and more rhythmically driven than a chord progression. Chord-based riffs are easy to have a go at. Just pick one or more chords from a key and start experimenting with the rhythm. For example, here are the diatonic chords in the key of E Phrygian. If you want to learn more about Phrygian key chords and progressions, there will be a link at the end of this video. A simple and popular chord progression uses the 1 chord E minor, the 2 chord F major, and the 7 chord D minor. Let's take these chords as the basis of our riff. You can use simple chords like this, but you are not limited. Different chord types can open up interesting sounds, and on the guitar they can be the simple addition or taking away of a finger. This can add rhythmic elements that help elevate us beyond the chord progression. In the next example, I explore this idea by using E minor 7 and D sus2. The rhythmic variations are short enough to feel like a riff and not a progression. A riff can come into the songwriting process at different times. It could be that you create a great riff in isolation and that inspires you to write the rest of a song. Remember that they contain rhythm, melody and harmony. This song DNA can be unpicked from the riff and lead to quick songwriting. Concentrate on the notes that are emphasised or stand out. These will lead you to suggested chord changes. You could also take an existing chord progression and turn this into a riff. This might be by using chord notes or whole chords as you saw earlier. Or you could take a song melody and use it for your riff inspiration. This is particularly useful for finding rhythmic hooks for your riffs. Sometimes starting with some limitations can really help your riff writing process, as it narrows down infinite possibilities to focus your attention. With that in mind, I'll use the song I've written in other videos on the channel to help inform a riff. If you want to learn how this was written, then watch the playlist at the end of this video. It's in the key of E Phrygian and has a BPM of 115. It starts with a 4-bar intro, which I want to create a riff for. The riff revolves around an E pedal note, and it's simple in its nature. The first 2 bars repeat, but rise up to a delayed D note over the G major 7th chord. The riff is reprised over the break sections. Listen to how the riff sounds different over the changed chords. Any other instruments played at the same time as your riffs will colour the sound, so make sure you experiment with your riff in the arrangement you are intending for your song. Have a listen to how the riff sounds, building up repetition, as well as the rest of the song. I hope this will inspire you to have a go at writing your own Phrygian mode riffs. You've learned how to write a riff, but you need to be able to write the rest of a Phrygian mode song. Watch the playlist on screen now to master Phrygian songwriting.